The gavel slams down in the echoing courtroom. A police officer in uniform sneers, his voice dripping with disdain as he mocks the young woman standing before him. What he doesn't know is that she isn't just any defendant. She's a Navy SEAL, trained to withstand brutality most people can't imagine. When he crosses the line, shoving her in front of a stunned judge and jury, the room goes silent. But then, she fights back. And in that instant, the cop learns a brutal lesson about respect, resilience, and underestimating the wrong person. The oak-paneled courtroom smelled faintly of dust and old leather, the kind of place where lives were measured out in legal terms and destinies shifted with the slam of a gavel. The tension that morning was so thick it felt like everyone inside was breathing the same, shallow air. At the defendant's table sat Lieutenant Maya Torres, her Navy dress uniform pressed to perfection. To the casual observer, she was just another young woman caught in a legal dispute. But Maya wasn't just another anything. She was one of the very few women to have earned the trident, the insignia of a United States Navy SEAL. Every medal she'd ever earned, every scar hidden beneath that uniform, told a story of survival, sacrifice, and strength. But none of that mattered to the man glaring at her from across the room. Officer Randall Briggs, a decorated cop on the outside, carried himself with the arrogance of someone who believed the badge gave him license to judge, to sneer, to look down on anyone who didn't fit his narrow mold of worthy. He didn't just see Maya as a defendant. He saw a woman of color in uniform, and in his world, that was an insult to his ego. The trial itself wasn't about violence, at least not at first. It was a civil case, one Maya had filed against Briggs for racial profiling and harassment. She had been pulled over months earlier, humiliated on the side of the road, accused of things she hadn't done. She chose to fight back, not with fists but with the law. But Briggs had other ideas. From the moment Maya entered the courtroom, his eyes followed her with a predator's glare. The sneer curled at his lips as he leaned over to his lawyer and muttered loud enough for the front row to hear, "Look at her. Navy SEAL. Huh? Probably slept her way into that uniform." A few jurors shifted uncomfortably. The judge's brow furrowed. But Maya, she didn't flinch. She'd been through worse. The bailiff called the court to order. The gavel struck wood. The case began. But Briggs wasn't interested in proceedings. Every chance he got, he leaned forward in his chair, whispering barbed insults, rolling his eyes, and scoffing dramatically whenever Maya's attorney spoke. He wanted to rattle her. He wanted to see the woman crack. Then, during cross-examination, it happened. Maya had just testified about the night of the traffic stop, how Briggs had pulled her out of her car without cause, how he slammed her against the hood while accusing her of resisting. Her voice was steady, clear, but Briggs couldn't take it. He stood suddenly, slamming his hand on the table. "She's lying. She's nothing but a fraud in uniform." The courtroom gasped. The judge pounded his gavel, shouting, "Officer Briggs, you will sit down." But Briggs didn't sit. He didn't stop. He crossed the aisle in 3 strides, his face red with rage, and before anyone could react, he shoved Maya hard in the shoulder. Gasps. Screams. The jury stood frozen, and Maya Torres, Navy SEAL, looked up at him with eyes that didn't carry fear, only calculation. This was no longer just a trial. It was a test. The shove reverberated like a gunshot in the courtroom. Maya's chair screeched across the floor as her body rocked backward. For a split second, silence hung heavy in the air, the kind of silence that comes right before a storm. The judge's gavel slammed furiously. "Order! Order in this court!" But Briggs wasn't done. His face twisted with venom as he leaned in, spitting words between clenched teeth. "You think you're tough? You're nothing but a quota higher in a man's world." The insult cut sharper than the shove, but Maya had heard worse, from enemies far deadlier than Randall Briggs. Slowly, deliberately, she stood. Her posture was precise, military perfect. Her chin lifted, her eyes locked on his. In that moment, the courtroom wasn't a courtroom anymore. To her, it was a battlefield, and Briggs had just made the fatal mistake of underestimating his opponent. The bailiff rushed forward. Officer Briggs stepped back, but Briggs ignored him, puffing his chest. "What's the matter, SEAL? Don't have your little rifle now, do you? Let's see what you're made of without the Navy backing you up." The jurors gasped again. A woman in the front row clutched her pearls. Maya's attorney rose from the defense table, shouting, "Your Honor, this is outrageous." "My client, stand down, counselor," the judge barked. His voice trembled, not from fear of Maya, but from shock at Briggs' brazen display. Maya could have exploded right then. Her training had conditioned her to react instantly to physical aggression. She could disarm a man twice Briggs' size in under 2 seconds. But this wasn't Afghanistan, and Briggs wasn't a terrorist. This was a courtroom. Every move mattered. So instead of striking back, Maya did something no one expected. She straightened her uniform jacket, smoothed the creases where his shove had wrinkled the fabric, and looked Briggs dead in the eye. Her voice was calm, measured, almost surgical in precision. "Officer Briggs, you just assaulted a Navy SEAL in front of a federal judge and 12 sworn jurors. Congratulations." The room erupted. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Briggs blinked, suddenly aware of the dozens of eyes piercing him, the court reporter's fingers clattering furiously on her stenograph machine, capturing every syllable. For the first time, hesitation flickered across his face. But arrogance is a stubborn disease. He doubled down, jabbing a finger at Maya. "Don't act like you're special. You're just a woman in uniform. Weak where it matters most." That did it. Maya took one step forward, not fast, not aggressive, but steady, purposeful. Her presence seemed to fill the room, commanding attention without a single raised hand. She didn't need to strike him. Every juror could see what was happening. The decorated cop unraveling, the disciplined soldier holding her ground. The judge bellowed, "Bailiff, restrain him." The bailiff grabbed Briggs' arm, but he shook him off, still glaring at Maya. "This isn't over," he growled. And Maya, unwavering, replied, "Oh, it's just beginning." The gavel slammed again. The trial had changed. No longer was it about harassment. Now, the whole nation would hear how a racist cop lost control in open court, and how the woman he thought he could break stood taller than ever. Chaos swept through the courtroom like a tidal wave. Jurors murmured, reporters scribbled, and spectators craned their necks to witness the spectacle unraveling before them. The sound of the gavel thundered again, the judge's voice rising above the uproar. "Bailiff, remove Officer Briggs from this courtroom immediately." 2 bailiffs surged forward this time. Briggs resisted, jerking his arms away. His voice cracked with rage as he pointed at Maya, spittle flying with every word. "She's lying. She's not a hero. She's a disgrace to the uniform." But the more he fought, the more pathetic he appeared. His badge, once a symbol of authority, now glistened under the fluorescent lights like an emblem of arrogance and corruption. Maya remained motionless, her hands clasped behind her back in parade rest, the stance of a soldier. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to fight. Her silence was louder than Briggs' outburst. The jury noticed. The gallery noticed. And, most importantly, the judge noticed. "Enough," the judge thundered. "Officer Briggs, you have not only disgraced yourself, but you have assaulted the very integrity of this court. You will be held in contempt." The words hit Briggs harder than any punch could have. His face drained of color, but he still struggled, snarling at the bailiffs who finally managed to pin his arms and drag him toward the doors. As he was hauled out, he twisted his neck to get one last look at Maya. His voice echoed, hoarse and venomous. "This isn't the end. You'll regret this." The heavy wooden doors slammed shut behind him. The sound reverberated through the chamber, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. For a moment, all eyes fell on Maya, the woman who had been shoved, insulted, threatened, yet never wavered. The judge leaned forward, peering over his glasses. "Lieutenant Torres, are you unharmed?" Maya gave a single, crisp nod. "I'm fine, Your Honor." Her voice was steady, but inside her chest, her heart pounded like a war drum. Not from fear, but from the familiar adrenaline of a mission about to escalate. The judge sighed heavily, tapping his gavel against the block with less force now. "Very well. Court will recess for 1 hour while we address this disgraceful interruption. "Lieutenant, I commend your restraint. Officer Briggs will face consequences far beyond this courtroom." The jurors exchanged glances, whispers darting between them. Many wore the same expression: admiration. They had just witnessed something extraordinary. Not only Briggs' public self-destruction, but Maya's unshakable composure. Her attorney leaned toward her, whispering urgently, "Maya, that was unbelievable. You just destroyed his entire case." But Maya's eyes stayed locked on the doors Briggs had been dragged through. She wasn't celebrating. Not yet. She knew men like him. Rage and hatred didn't burn out easily. They smoldered. They plotted. And something deep inside told her this battle wasn't confined to the courtroom. As the spectators slowly shuffled out and the buzz of conversation filled the corridors, Maya adjusted her uniform one last time. To the world, she had just won the first round. But to her, it felt like the calm before the storm. The courtroom's chaos slowly faded, replaced by silence as Maya sat alone in the holding chamber. The hum of fluorescent lights above was steady, almost hypnotic, and for a brief moment, she closed her eyes. And just like that, she was back. Not in a courtroom, not in uniform, but on a gritty training beach in Coronado, California, where the Pacific Ocean punished her body with freezing waves and sand clung to every inch of her skin. It was Hell Week, the most infamous phase of Navy SEAL training. 5.5 days of near-constant activity with only a few hours of sleep. For most, it was the end of the line. For Maya, it was the beginning. "Torres," the instructor's voice bellowed, cutting through the wind. "You think you can hack it out here? You're a girl playing soldier." Every candidate around her was collapsing. Men twice her size, bodies trembling, minds begging for rest. But Maya refused to quit. She pushed the boat above her head higher, her muscles screaming as she shouted back with the rest of her crew. The instructors were merciless. That was their job, to break you down, strip away everything you thought you were, until only the unbreakable remained. And Maya? She refused to be broken. The memory shifted, her body dragged through mud, carrying a teammate twice her weight across a finish line. The look on the men's faces when they realized she wasn't just keeping up, she was setting the pace. She remembered the whispers too, the doubt. She won't last a week. They'll cut her before the dive phase. A woman can't make it through BUD/S. Each word carved itself into her mind like a blade. And instead of cutting her down, it sharpened her resolve. Back in the chamber, Maya opened her eyes. Her pulse had slowed, her breathing steady. To anyone else, the courtroom showdown with Briggs would have been a traumatic memory, something that haunted them for weeks. But for her, it was just another trial, another test of endurance. She'd endured far worse. Because the truth was, every battle she'd fought in training, every sleepless night on deployment, every moment she was told she wasn't enough, all of it had forged her for this exact moment. Maya straightened in her chair, brushing an invisible speck of dust from her sleeve. She wasn't a victim, and she wouldn't allow herself to be painted as one. Briggs thought the shove had been his victory, but in reality, it had handed her the advantage. Because while he unraveled in front of the world, Maya's strength wasn't just physical. It was the kind of strength born from pain, discipline, and survival. The kind that couldn't be taught in a police academy or hidden behind a badge. The kind of strength that only a SEAL could understand. And soon, everyone in that courtroom, and everyone watching from the outside world, would understand it too. The air was thick with heat and dust, the kind that clung to your lungs and made every breath a reminder of how fragile life was. Afghanistan, 2014. Maya crouched behind a crumbled wall, her rifle tight against her chest. Her unit had been ambushed on a night raid. What was supposed to be a clean extraction of a high-value target had turned into a chaotic firefight. "Torres, cover the flank," her team leader barked through the comms. Rounds cracked overhead, shards of concrete spraying her helmet. The men beside her cursed under their breath. Even in the middle of hell, she could hear the doubt. She wasn't deaf to it. She knew what some of them thought, that she didn't belong here, that she was an experiment in diversity, a box checked on someone's report. But right now, None of that mattered, because while others were panicking, Maya's breathing slowed. Her heart rate steadied. The chaos sharpened her focus. She peeked over the rubble, spotted the muzzle flash of an enemy rifle, and squeezed the trigger. One shot. Clean. Silence where noise had been. Her teammate, a broad-shouldered Texan named O'Connor, gave her a look as if seeing her for the first time. "Damn, Torres," he muttered. "Nice shot." But she wasn't here for compliments. She was here for survival. The ambush dragged on. Explosions in the distance. The enemy knew the terrain better. They had the advantage. But Maya refused to yield. When one of her teammates went down with shrapnel in his leg, she didn't hesitate. She threw him over her shoulders, every muscle screaming under the weight, and carried him through a hail of gunfire toward cover. The memory burned itself into her body, the weight of his blood soaking into her uniform, the sharp pain in her ribs as a round grazed past. But she didn't stop. She kept moving, step after agonizing step, until they were both safe behind a wall of armored vehicles. And when dawn finally broke, when the gunfire fell silent, her team walked out alive. Not because she was the strongest, not because she was the fastest, but because she refused to fold under pressure. Back in the present, in that quiet chamber outside the courtroom, Maya rubbed the scar near her ribcage where the bullet had kissed her years ago. A reminder, not of pain, but of survival. Officer Briggs thought a shove, an insult, a sneer could unnerve her. He had no idea who he was dealing with, because Maya had already faced death and walked away. She had carried men larger than him through fire. She had stared down enemies who wanted her dead and beat them. Compared to all that, Briggs was nothing more than noise. And noise, she had learned long ago, could always be silenced. The toughest battles Maya ever fought weren't always on foreign soil. They weren't always against men with rifles, bombs, or ambushes waiting in the dark. The hardest battles lived inside her. Long before she wore the trident, before she was called SEAL, Maya had to fight through the endless weight of doubt. Not just from others, but from herself. She remembered the day she told her father she wanted to enlist. His laugh was short, sharp, almost cruel. A Navy SEAL? Maya, that's not for people like us. That's not for women. Pick something else. Something safer. But Maya never wanted safe. She wanted to prove, maybe to the world, but more importantly to herself, that she was more than what people decided she could be. The need followed her into training. Every time she strapped on fins and dove into icy waters, she could hear instructors whisper, "She won't last." Every obstacle course she ran, she could see eyes rolling, bets being made on how quickly she'd quit. And every time she succeeded, the bar shifted. It was never enough. In deployment, it was no different. When she carried that wounded teammate in Afghanistan, saving his life, some praised her. But others said, she just got lucky. She's still a liability. That was the war Maya fought every single day. Not just the enemy outside, but the prejudice within her own ranks. The unspoken belief that her victories didn't count, that her courage was less valuable because of who she was. And yet, in a strange way, that pressure became her fuel. She learned to turn every insult into energy, every doubt into discipline. If someone said she couldn't do 20 pull-ups, she did 30. If someone muttered that she couldn't handle the dive phase, she mastered it so completely that instructors used her as an example. But the greatest lesson she learned wasn't about strength or endurance. It was about control. In combat, she realized panic kills. And in life, anger does the same. The true power of a warrior isn't in striking first. It's in choosing when not to strike. That was why, in the courtroom earlier, she hadn't retaliated when Briggs shoved her. Why she stood tall instead of lashing out. Years of struggle had taught her this. Anyone can throw a punch, but only the truly powerful can hold one back. Sitting in the quiet chamber now, Maya felt the weight of all those battles pressing on her shoulders, and then, just as quickly, lifting, because she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Briggs wasn't just up against a woman in uniform. He wasn't even up against a Navy SEAL. He was up against every scar she'd earned, every doubt she'd crushed, every fire she'd survived. and he had no idea how outmatched he really was. The hour of recess ended, and when the courtroom doors opened again, the atmosphere was entirely different. What had begun that morning as just another trial now felt like the stage for something much bigger. Reporters had already caught wind of the chaos. Camera crews swarmed the courthouse steps. The gallery was packed, whispers flying from bench to bench. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. And when Briggs was escorted back in, his hands cuffed in front of him, a bailiff on each arm, the room erupted in murmurs. His once proud stride was gone, replaced with the uneven shuffle of a man who knew the world had just witnessed his mask slip. Maya sat calmly at the defense table, her uniform still crisp, her face unreadable. But her eyes, those eyes locked onto Briggs, burned with the quiet strength of someone who didn't need to raise her voice to command the room. The judge banged his gavel. This court will come back to order. Officer Briggs, your outburst and assault on Lieutenant Torres will be entered into the official record. Your behavior is inexcusable, and you will face contempt charges in addition to the claims already brought against you. Briggs tried to speak, but his lawyer pulled him back down into his seat, whispering furiously. It was too late, though. The damage had been done. Everyone in that courtroom had seen who Briggs really was. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Maya's attorney rose. Your Honor, in light of the events that transpired during this recess, I believe the jury now has direct evidence of Officer Briggs' behavior. Evidence far more powerful than any testimony. The judge nodded gravely. Proceed. Maya stood when her attorney gestured to her. The jurors leaned forward, their pens paused, their attention fixed on her. She didn't launch into theatrics. She didn't need to. Instead, she spoke with the same calm authority she'd used in combat briefings. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've heard me testify about the harassment I endured. You've heard about the night I was pulled from my car, accused without cause, and treated as if my service and sacrifice meant nothing. But what you witnessed just an hour ago was not my testimony. It was the truth, unfiltered, undeniable. Officer Briggs did in this courtroom what he did on the street. He lashed out. He targeted me. He used force where none was justified. Not because of what I did, but because of who I am. The room was silent, every ear straining to hear. Maya let her gaze sweep across the jurors before finishing. And if he behaves this way here, in front of a judge, in front of all of you, ask yourselves, how does he behave when no one is watching? The word struck like a hammer. Briggs' lawyer buried his face in his hands. For the first time since the trial began, Maya felt the balance shift. The courtroom wasn't just hers to defend anymore. It was hers to command. The judge gave a curt nod. Lieutenant Torres, you may step down. Maya returned to her seat, calm as ever, while the jurors scribbled furiously. The image was burned into their minds. Briggs, the supposed figure of law and order, restrained like a criminal. Maya, the accused in his report, standing steady like the very embodiment of discipline. Now it was time for the evidence. Her attorney rose again, voice clear and deliberate. Your Honor, the defense would like to enter into evidence several complaints previously filed against Officer Briggs during his tenure with the department. The courtroom buzzed. Briggs' lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. These complaints were never sustained, but the judge cut him off with a raised hand. Sit down, counselor. After today's events, the jury has a right to context. Proceed. The attorney clicked a remote, and the projector behind him lit up with documents. Reports filed by citizens, fellow officers, even supervisors. The words painted a damning picture. Excessive force, racial profiling, verbal harassment, abuse of authority. The jurors shifted uncomfortably. One of them frowned, tapping his pen nervously against the notepad. Another, a woman in her 60s, shook her head in disbelief. Briggs grew red in the face, muttering under his breath. Lies. All of it lies. But his voice carried, and the jury heard the desperation dripping from every word. Then came the witness testimony. The attorney called a young man to the stand, a former cadet at the police academy. He looked nervous, but when sworn in, his voice steadied. Officer Briggs was one of my trainers. He used to tell us things that made me uncomfortable. He'd say women had no business in uniform. He'd say minorities needed to be put in their place. He even told us once that if we couldn't scare someone into compliance, we weren't doing our jobs. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The young man's words weren't just statements. They were character evidence, hammering nails into the coffin of Briggs' reputation. Maya sat silently, hands folded, her eyes never leaving Briggs. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. Her composure contrasted perfectly with the unraveling storm across the aisle. Because every new piece of evidence, every testimony, wasn't just dismantling Briggs' case, it was dismantling him. By the time the cadet stepped down, Briggs looked less like a cop and more like a cornered animal, pacing in his seat, tugging against the cuffs around his wrists. His lawyer whispered frantically, but Briggs wasn't listening. He was too busy glaring at Maya. Hatred etched deep into his features. But the difference now was undeniable. The jury no longer saw a Navy SEAL on trial. They saw a predator exposed. The courtroom was silent except for the faint scratch of pens against paper. The jurors' expressions said everything: disbelief, anger, and something else, clarity. The judge cleared his throat. The jury will disregard any emotional outbursts and focus only on the evidence presented. But everyone knew the evidence had already spoken louder than Briggs ever could. Then it happened. Briggs snapped. He shot to his feet, shaking off his lawyer's restraining hand. "You think she's innocent?" His voice cracked, echoing against the chamber walls. "You think she's some kind of hero? She's nothing. Just another." "Officer Briggs," the judge thundered. "Sit down." But Briggs wasn't listening anymore. He lunged forward, pointing a trembling finger at Maya. His face was flushed, eyes wild. "She ruined me. That's what women like her do. They ruin men like me." The gallery erupted. Gasps, cries, the click of reporters' cameras capturing his meltdown in real time. The bailiffs rushed in, grabbing his arms, dragging him back down to the chair. Maya didn't move. She didn't need to. Her silence, her calm, her sheer presence said more than any words could. The judge finally lost patience. He slammed the gavel down so hard it echoed like a gunshot. "Enough. Officer Briggs, your conduct has disgraced this court. You will be remanded into custody immediately pending further charges." Briggs' lawyer slumped in defeat. The jurors' faces were stone. The battle was over. When it came time for the closing statements, Maya's attorney hardly needed to speak. The evidence was already carved into the minds of everyone present. He kept it short, turning to the jury with a single line. "You've seen the truth with your own eyes. Justice demands you act on it." Hours later, the jury filed back in. The foreperson stood, voice steady. "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Lieutenant Maya Torres." A roar of approval filled the room. Spectators cheering, reporters rushing out to deliver the news. Briggs sat pale, hollow, cuffed at the wrists, as if the weight of his arrogance had finally crushed him. And Maya? She stood, straight-backed, her eyes level and calm. She didn't raise her fists in victory. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded once in acknowledgement, like a soldier completing another mission. As she walked out of the courtroom, the flash of cameras blinded her, questions firing from every direction. But she didn't stop. She didn't need the spotlight. What mattered was already done. Briggs had tried to strip her of dignity. He had tried to reduce her to nothing. Instead, he had revealed himself and given her the chance to stand not just for herself, but for everyone he had ever targeted, belittled, or broken. Outside, the sunlight hit her face. She took a long breath, the kind that carried both exhaustion and relief. The war inside that courtroom was over, and Maya Torres had won, not just for herself, but for every voice that had been silenced by men like Briggs.